California was settled by and lived in and farmed and taken care of for thousands of years by the Tongva people. And that other portions of California, Chumash, whatever, actually our entire country, all of the land that we're on, is the land of native peoples here, Canada, Mexico, South America. And what we need to do is to remind ourselves that nobody owns the land. The land is owned by the Creator. Whatever you feel is that spirit that brought that about. But it has been given to for the sustenance of and the benefit of the people who live, till it, live off it, live with it, understand it, love it, and speak to it and from it. And for us here, that's the Tongva. And so I'd like to recognize that and to also say that we're about, what, maybe quarter of a mile from a newly and still developing return of Tongva land off Eaton Canyon. And I know there was just a meeting there of some of the tribal elders and friends, and we hope over the years that this will become a place where our PJTC youth can have connections with the people who, were the original people here, and that we can build on that a strong relationship and a friendship. And I think that's true wherever you are in the world, that we often neglect to remember the indigenous people, the earliest settlers. We're all migrants. We're all from someplace else, for the most of it, no matter how long we've been in a place. So let's recall that, as we're told in the Torah, we're all strangers, and remember that we were once, and still are in many cases, strangers in a foreign land. So that acceptance is really important. So it's my real great privilege this evening to introduce Samantha Johnson, who's here, and she's a member of the Tongva tribe and council, I believe.
Not council.
Not council. She will be soon.
That's for the
elders. Samantha graced us a few months ago with a presentation over the internet that didn't work out.
Yeah.
And so we needed to redo this, and we're thankful to Samantha for coming back and putting up with us despite that. And her mother, Kimberly Johnson, is now a doctoral student?
Yes.
Doctoral student in Native American history at UC Davis, and cannot be with us this evening, but she is here maybe in virtual form anyway, if she can't be here either in person or directly. So I personally am very grateful to both Samantha and Kimberly and to the Tongva people for this opportunity to bring us all together. So Kimberly is I'm going to let her talk a little bit about this. She's an artist, she's a botanist, she's a person involved in cementing the land that has been reclaimed and continuing that process. So I'm really happy to present Samantha Johnson to you.
Thank you. Carl for that really beautiful introduction. I'm blushing if you can't see in the dim light. I hope that you can in the dim light. But this will just be an overview of our history and a little bit of what's happening today in the spirit of Native American Heritage Month. Thank you all for being here. Sometimes I wish during Native American Heritage Month that, as Native Americans we could catch a break, but at the same time, I love things like this because I know that this is an opportunity for us to celebrate our heritage and for you to celebrate it with us. So thank you for being here on a Sunday night to learn more about this history. Native American history is, notoriously hard, but there are some uplifting things that have recently happened, as Carl has hinted to. So I'm excited to share all of them with you. So my name is Samantha Morales-Johnson. I am the land return coordinator for the Tongva Tatahat Land Conservancy, which I will get into later, and a botanical illustrator. I focus on California botanical plants because I think that they're underappreciated in their beauty. And I'm very biased as a Tongva woman who's grown up around these plants. So that's what I focus on in my botany work. Both the physical botany and the illustration. But this is my family. I wouldn't be here without them, especially in Native culture. It feels wrong to acknowledge myself without acknowledging my elders and my ancestors. And so this is my family. These are the people who came before me, except for the youngster right there in the bandana. That's my baby cousin Ellie, who just turned 10 in my regalia that I had handed down to her when I grew out of it. And the rest of it is my family and my tribe. And they're the ones that are really the reason why I am a botanical illustrator today, why I'm a land return coordinator, and why I'm here speaking to you all. So now to get into the history of specifically the Tongva people. So our traditional lands encompass about, I would say, 2/3 of LA County from my research. And we had about, I think, 150 villages from when I last remember counting, and a population of about 2,000 people. We often traded with the Chuvash, Tataviam, Serrano, but also we were seafaring people. And so we were really big traders. We occupied the Channel Islands as well. And so we had a really rich trade system of soapstone, which could be used to turn into bowls, medallions, tools. It was a very useful soft stone to carve with. So that was a main trading item for us, and we were also incredibly talented basket weavers. There is basket weaving that is Tongva unique, that no other tribe can really show the same level of skill. We used to make our baskets watertight without any kind of asphaltum or anything else. So we were incredibly skilled basket weavers. We were skilled mathematicians and navigators. We used the stars to navigate our plank canoes, known as tiats, up and down the coast, and we traded with Polynesian tribes, Hawaiians, and Alaskan Inuit people alike. So we used the Port of Long Beach in a very similar way that it is today, honestly. So we lived in harmony with the environment. Growing up, I learned that the natural world was, you could look around at your field of sage scrub, and it was your grocery store, it was your pharmacy, it was your hardware store, but it was also your church and it was your school. So it was what you learned from, and then it was what you could take advantage of. Everything had multi-use. There was always a use for a plant, and there was always incredible respect for the plant because of how it could be used and the way that it would survive in our harsh conditions. But harsh conditions weren't everywhere. We actually did have some quite pristine areas in Los Angeles before it was completely paved over with asphalt. One that's left over is Cutavungna Springs in Santa Monica. That's the Cutavungna translates to the place under the sun. It's a beautiful spring that actually is open the first Saturday of every month for cleanup and maintenance. And so you can find it if you look up Cutavungna on your Google Maps. It should be right next to University High School. But it's kind of an example of the beauty that was, and abundance that was once here on Tovangar on Tongva land. So there were several springs that were open, and this is the only one that is uncapped and untouched now. And so this is the last spring in Tongva in LA County, even though we had several running streams, and all of our villages had access to water. That's why we put our villages there. We used a lot of water-heavy plants. And so the drought that we're experiencing now was very unlike what we had before colonization. So my personal group is the Gabrielino Tongva San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians. They're the original inhabitants of the entire Los Angeles and Orange County Basin, including Santa Catalina, San Nicolas, San Clemente, and Santa Barbara Islands. The San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians continues its base in San Gabriel and is the only state-recognized tribe in the Los Angeles and Orange County area. Our lineage dates back thousands of years before colonization and is also documented in the San Gabriel Mission. The tribal name Gabrielino is a Spanish derivative of San Gabriel, and our native tribe name is Tongva, derived from the native language. Tongva is translated to people of the earth. We recognize both names as homage to our ancestors who lived in our defined territories by the San Gabriel Mission. We are the first Angelinos, and we are here, Equishem. Equishem is we are here in Tongva. So the San Gabriel Mission in the modern era, post-California statehood, is complicated. I am of Afro-Indigenous descent, and I honestly kind of see the mission in a similar way to my ancestral plantations in the South. Because we were enslaved there, we were indoctrinated there, and it is a place of painful history. But in the postmodern era of California statehood, they actually helped us a lot. They provided work, shelter, food and water, and continued our community. And so without their documentations and without their papers, some of us would not know our original families and our original lineage, but also they documented our culture and helped us maintain some parts of our language and some parts of our culture because of their documentation. So the California missions were obviously very complicated, but the ranchos in the Los Angeles area were less so, but this was the first time that so after the mission era, when the mission no longer fully functioned as a rancho, and instead ranchos started becoming more common around the mission. This was the first beginning part of Los Angeles as a city. And so in the ranchos, we were treated as, as stagehands. We were servants, we were there to work and work the land and work the houses. But we were able to assimilate pretty easily into that culture because we already were servants at the mission, and we already spoke Spanish, and we were already kind of assimilated into Mexican and Spanish style living. But then when California became a state in 1850, the good thing was that Hugo Reed wrote his book, and which he married a Tongva woman and documented our culture more accurately than it was before. But in that same year, the California governor issued bounties. And so this bounty issued the state of California to pay $17.50 for the murder of a Native American. So per head was $17.50. I looked it up, and that's about $400 in today's money. And so basically we hid within our Mexican neighbors. So because we already spoke Spanish, because we were already brown, and we looked indigenous similar to the Mexican community, we assimilated for safety. Or a lot of people migrated to different areas where they weren't recognized as Native, and so a lot of our families also went up to Northern California as well, and we're still recovering from that divide that happened in 1852. So obviously with this bounty on our heads, it was bad to be, Mexican indigenous because you were still a laborer and a worker, but it was even worse to be an Indian because you could go for $7.50 a head. But in the 1930s, we began to really see our cultural revival. And in my opinion, the person that really started that was this beautiful woman, Beatrice Alva. B. Alva was the first San Gabriel Fiesta Queen of 1934. And she grew up being a part of the mission play, which was kind of like a minstrel show of like Tongva culture, but it was like the first breath of what she got for Tongva culture, because like I said, it was bad to be Native, and so her family didn't really talk about being Tongva other than her grandmother saying a couple phrases in Tongva, and she knew one song about a coyote chasing a rabbit up a mountain, and she had no idea what else it meant. So she started researching. She went to the San Gabriel Mission, the library. She started reading the Hugo Reed letters, and she started doing research about our culture. And then she went to her family that she knew was also affiliated with the San Gabriel Mission, and she brought them together to start relearning our culture and re-celebrating our culture. And so what's really great is most recently we had an augmented reality monument of Bialva made. One day, hopefully, it will be a physical monument, but this is the first step. So in Grand Park, but also online, if you download the Kinfolk app, there should be a monument of Bialva that you can put on any flat space. If any of you are familiar with Pokemon Go, where you can like see the Squirtle like on your like at the local park or something, it's the Kinfolk app is that, but for monuments of people that we think should be celebrated, specifically Black, Brown, Indigenous, and queer folks. So Bialva is now one of those monuments. And that's my grandpa standing next to her in that virtual space, and we had to like figure out so he wouldn't get covered by it and vice versa. So in the 1980s was the repatriation of Pavangna. In my opinion, this was one of the first times that we were really officially recognized by a larger institution as a tribe. And so my family, my grandfather, Arthur Morales, as well as my great uncle and my mom, actually. My mom is the little girl in that red jacket. They returned the ancestral bones to Pavangna, which was going to be turned into a mini mall for the campus, but is now still protected. And as from what I last heard, they're doing cleanup days now to try and clean up the debris that was left there from a building that was built where they pushed all of the building debris onto the land, and then by the time the building was done, they went, "Oh my gosh, we're so sorry," and then they took it off, and they were like, "See, we're doing it." Like, yeah, after you built it. But that's my own little tiff with Cal State Long Beach. I'm an alumni there. I love them, but that was not cool. In recent news, 2019, Governor Newsom officially apologized to the Native Americans for the atrocities. And Mayor Eric Garcetti also apologized specifically to the Tongva people in 2021. So this is my family, my aunt, my cousin, with Mayor Garcetti, and then here's the rest of my family there with him, along with some Tatavian folks as well, who are, as we saw on the previous map, are also a part of the LA County, tribal territories. But I think the most exciting news is the land return on February of 2022. So the Tongva Tarahat Pahaba Conservancy was created to store lands in Tovangar, the traditional Tongva region, encompassing the greater Los Angeles basin. The Conservancy has received land back and is working to create a community center for Indigenous people, maintain cultural practices, have space for traditional ceremony, work on language revitalization, provide housing for Indigenous elders, and archive community documents. Tarahat is the Tongva word for the Indigenous people in the plural. It is used here in the sense that this conservancy is intended to preserve the people and the culture of the Tongva as well as the land, and Pahava is the Tongva word for a piece of land. So what we have is 1 acre of very fertile, beautiful oak grove habitat. We have 30 coastline oak trees that give abundant acorns. It's right near the mountains and near Eaton Canyon. And it has a good amount of housing and community space available. And there is a possibility that the fire circle that is there, that's this western, fireplace with like these rock benches, it may have been built there because there was evidence of a Tongva fire circle being there, but we're waiting to get that verified. So there's a lot of really good things on this returned land. But there's also some bad things. plants. So it is overrun with invasive non-native plants. Along the bottom here, you can see we have a lot of ivy that has pretty much taken over our oak grove area. We also have 70 invasive eucalyptus trees, which are very tall and very hard to get rid of, that are taking water from our oak trees and just kind of causing a problem. And then it was also previously hoarded property. And so since March of this year, we've cleared about 5 dumpsters worth of debris. About 3 of those dumpsters were like the big 40-foot long ones. And so we've had to do a lot of cleanup on just hoarded material alone. But we're also going to work on getting the soil tested as well to make sure that there isn't anything left over. It was a lot of stuff with asbestos, a lot of old paint, a lot of old chemicals. This house was built back in the 1930s, so we had to also change out the original pipes. So the photo here is the original galvanized cast iron pipes that we just changed out this past summer of just the house, but the rest of the land still has the galvanized pipes on it. We just got the electricity up to code. The buildings are finally livable. And so we've been doing a lot of maintenance on what was previously neglected land. So our goals for this place is, of Tarahapahava, is to take advantage of our 1 acre by sustainably planting native plants. So we're gonna work with the Payne Foundation, Thomas Payne. We're going to work with the California Native Plant Society and many others within the native plant community to, as sustainably as possible, change this land around. So we're composting, we're trying to replant our plants that, we have a lot of spider plants that can be turned into very happy house plants, so we're trying to save as many of those as we can. We're trying to see what we can do about the eucalyptus once we've taken it off, if we're going to be able to reuse the wood for anything. And we're hoping to become a model for people to fully transform their spaces into native plants if that's what they want. We're also going to create a space of Tongva learning and culture to begin generational healing. Right now our language is under a patent. We can only learn in one space. I'm not sure what will happen after that patent is expired, but I'm hoping that we could use our space as a cultural learning center for language. We also want to learn it for basket weaving, for crafts, for revitalizing our culture really in a way that hasn't been possible before because we haven't had gathering access. And without gathering access, without plant access, you just lost our pharmacy, our tool shed, our pantry. We have to have that gathering. So the native plants are essential for this cultural and learning healing. We want to expand land and return to make free housing available for all Tongva people on Tovangar. In a perfect world, I really like to think that even urban Indians deserve a place on their native land without having to worry about a rent or mortgage. And so I'm really hoping that in the future we have enough housing to house all of our native relatives, because we still have relatives and tribal members who live out of state because they just simply can't afford Los Angeles anymore. And then we want to also expand yard return to more than just necessarily Tongva-owned land for more widespread environmental action. So we want to be able to use our journey with converting this land and our plant knowledge to help other people return their yards to native plants. So we've acknowledged the land. Land acknowledgements have been done for quite a few years now. And even when they first started out, I was thankful because for a long time people did not know the native land that they are on. People really know the Chumash because they're a bigger tribe, but usually it's like the Cherokee, the Iroquois, the Sioux, the really large Plain Indian tribes, which I respect greatly, but not a lot of people know their local culture. And so the land acknowledgements were great because it immediately brought that to the front of people's attention. But what happens after you tell people that something exists? So what do you do after that? So to do that, it's really about being a good guest. So to acknowledge that you are a guest on the land of people who still exist here, not just human people, but also non-human people, like the plant people and the animal people that still occupy here. So to become a good guest, you can participate in Kuya Noa'a, which is a guest exchange, which is something that we're trying to do in order to facilitate our work. Basically, we have a calculator online at tongva.land/donate, and as a resident, you can decide based off of a percentage from your mortgage or rent how much you would like to give annually. So usually it's about 1 to 2% of your mortgage or rent, just as a way to contribute to a guest exchange as a guest on this beautiful land. Make some plant friends is the other option. So, one thing that I work on a lot is white sage protection, because right now it's exploited as smudge sticks. Most of the smudge sticks that you see inside yoga studios, Five Below, major stores, they're wild gathered, which means that they're poached. So these plants are completely ripped up from native ancestral gathering grounds in national parks in order to bundle them and sell them as, good vibe sticks or whatever they put them as. And so because of this, people are saying that white sage or saging is a closed practice. And I actually disagree with that. I don't want saging to be a closed practice, because the purchasing of sage is not the practice. Making a friend with white sage, building a relationship with white sage, and then gathering from her and using that stick to smudge, that's saging, and that's the practice that I want to be open. And so I think that's the same for all native plants. I want people to make friends out of my relatives, because there's so many uses and there's so many beautiful things that these native plants can be used for, and to just love on them and to speak good words onto them is speaking good words onto the original people of the earth, even before we came, right? So make some plant friends to be a good guest. And then learn about native people, which you're already doing by being here, so good job. Check that off the box this month. But if you would like to learn more, you can go to gabrielino-nsn.us. We have an extensive photo gallery and timeline there with a lot more to learn about. Or you can also go to tongva.land, which has a little bit more about our land return and our story there. These are also some book recommendations as a courtesy of my mom, who's currently up in Davis getting her doctorate in Native American Studies. So these are some of the books that she's reading for her program. They're not light reads, but if you're up for the challenge, all of these are recommended by probably one of the most legitimate resources you can get as far as Tongva Native American history, because my mom has been involved in this work for as long as she's been alive, and is even more involved now that she's really learning about the history at UC Davis.
Excuse me, but would you mind reading the author of those three?
Yes, so the other slavery, or?
All three.
Okay, yeah, so it's The Birth of Los Angeles by Peter Boyd, B-O-Y-D. And it's The Birth of Los Angeles and the Genocide of the Tongva. Very light read. A really, really easy beachside. Bring your box of tissues. And then the middle one is Murder State by Brendan C. Lindsay. Lindsay is spelled like Lindsay. Maybe that's how it's pronounced. And then the last one is The Other Slavery, the uncovered story of Indian enslavement. And this one actually does not say who it's by, but it is a New York Times bestseller, so if you look up The Other Slavery, you should find the one that's right. Would anyone like me to stay on this page for just a little bit longer?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that book is in Romans, The Other Slavery. I think I saw that.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It's there.
And then books that aren't on here, or other media that's not on here that I would recommend, I do really like the Reservation Dogs show, if you're not sure if you should be watching it or not, on Hulu. It's really good. It really shows like Native American culture and community in a really interesting way. I'm an urban native, so I don't get all of the res jokes, but the community stuff is very, very much like native focused and native voiced. And then my favorite book still is The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. That author is a little bit problematic. He's known to be a little bit misogynistic, but most authors maybe kind of are. So when you go beyond land acknowledgement, I think that there's kind of steps for how radical you want to get when you go beyond that land acknowledgement. So I think a really easy first step is participating in Kuyam Noa'a. Doing the calculator of your rent or mortgage is great, but if you just want to give a small gift at the end of every year just to acknowledge that you're on stolen land and you want to contribute towards land return, I think any donation or any type of participation in Kuyam Noa'a is deeply appreciated by us. And then if you want to go a little bit past that, the next step I think is yard return. Transforming your yard to include a lot more native plants, because these are, like I said, the original inhabitants of this land even before the people were. And so transforming your garden for native plants and learning about them and loving on them, that is the first type of return after Kuyam Noa'a. And then land return, which I think is by far the most radical and the biggest step, is something that could also be contributed by considering returning any property to the original habitats through our nonprofit. And so we hope to, like I said, we hope to acquire more land on Los Angeles just that way we can have all of our tribal people live here again. We're already in negotiation with a woman who was offered to give us her house and her will. And we're hoping to see similar radical donations and land return in order to really return our culture to Los Angeles County. So that's pretty much the conclusion of my talk today. This is our information, the Gabrielino Tongva San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, or P.O. Box. We're kind of in San Gabriel, now we're a little bit more in Altadena because of the land return. But our Gmail is there, as well as that website that has our extensive historical information. So thank you all for listening.